Israel Updates with Gadi and Mike Duran. Hello and welcome to Tablet's Israel Update. It's been 1 year, 8 months, and 26 days since this war began. It's the 3rd of July, and tomorrow is Independence Day. Happy Independence Day, Mike.
Thank you.
Are you celebrating at the headquarters at the Hudson Institute?
Yes, of course we are. We're very, very thankful for the independence of the United States, and we are, of course, as sane as possible under the circumstances.
You are then, are you?
Are you not?
I'm in Israel, Mike. That's an irrelevant question. If you're too sane, you don't make it in our quarters here. What we're going to do on this show is we have 3 segments, and unlike previous shows, we're going to tell you what they are. So there's a interesting development in terms of the Israeli deep state, and that is not a direct result of Donald Trump's tweets about the injustice of the Netanyahu trial, but it might be connected. And then there's Gaza and what is going on there or not going on there. And finally, there's going to be a Netanyahu visit to the White House on Monday, and big things are probably in store for the Middle East. Do you find my description convincing so far, Mike?
I do, but you forgot the 4th segment.
There is a 4th segment. I didn't know.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
What is it?
Sex and chocolate.
I did forget that because I was concentrated on the fun.
We're gonna. It's a new feature here. We're gonna pander to the audience, give them what they really want.
So just comment with your address, and you'll get sex and chocolate in the mail, apparently. But let's start with the headlines, Mike. So what's been going on?
Gadi, on Monday, former IDF Chief of Staff Gadi Eisen and several senior figures announced their departure from Benny Gantz's National Unity Party. There's a lot of speculation in the press that they're going to join former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett in upcoming elections. On Monday, President Trump signed an executive order to ease sanctions on Syria. As you mentioned, Prime Minister Netanyahu is scheduled to visit the White House next week. Of course, they're going to take a victory lap over the war against Iran, but I think the main item on the agenda is going to be the proposed deal on Gaza, which you and I will discuss in a minute. President Trump has stated that he's not interested in resuming diplomatic talks with Iran. He continues to insist that their nuclear program was obliterated. That's his word. Gadi, the Israeli Supreme Court conducted hearings to determine whether Prime Minister Netanyahu has the authority to name the replacement for former Shin Bet head Ronen Bar. That is, of course, General Zinni. The press is against it. The Supreme Court deferred the discussion to a later time, and I know you're going to have a lot to say about that. On Tuesday, President Trump announced on Truth Social that Israel had agreed to a ceasefire in Gaza. He warned that if Hamas does not accept the deal, quote, it will not get better, it will only get worse. That's how I pronounce Trump tweets when they're all in all caps. Those are the main issues, I think. Gadi, over to you.
Yeah, so very interesting stuff is going on. Before I get to the Supreme Court and what is going on with the deep state in Israel, just to mention that I just came back from a Channel 14 panel discussion, and Netanyahu visited Nahal Oz. Now, the left has been screaming ever since the atrocities of October 7 that why is Netanyahu not going to Nahal Oz, where a lot of this stuff happened. And the reason is Netanyahu didn't go because he understood this, he would be ambushed there by these exact same people who are calling on him to visit there and saying that he is Mar Hafkara, the Mr. Negligence or Mr. Neglect. And by the word neglect, they mean neglecting the hostages in the Hamas tunnels. So, as you know, Mike, the leading voice in the committee of the families of the hostages was Enav Tsangauker, who is the mother of Matan Tsangauker, the hostage, who has been the forefront of and some of the demanding entrance to Knesset committees, ambushing politicians. She was very loud, and her pain became a symbol. As you know, I've been saying here that manipulators have been pushing the families of hostages to the forefront, despite the fact that those manipulators understood full well that this will make it harder to get the hostages, not easier, because their aim was to topple the government. And never in the history of Israel has been we seen anything so disgustingly cynical. And people kept saying, what are they doing to her? They're making her the symbol of this. And she had very extreme rhetoric against Netanyahu and his family and all that. I don't know his family, but at least Netanyahu and the government. And people said, what are you doing to her? Her son will become the greatest asset of Hamas. And so Netanyahu went to Nahal Oz, and there he met Enav Tzangauker. And we sat there in the panel, our jaws dropped as we saw Sarah Netanyahu hugging Enav Tzangauker. And Netanyahu speaking to them. We couldn't hear what they were saying. This was just a visual, but that was a very dramatic event. And you can already see on Twitter that the Kaplan quarters, the anti-Netanyahu protesters, are finding this impossible to compute, because she has become the forefront of all their struggles against the government. I think generally people are getting tired of the Kaplan protesters. There was just we just saw that the mullahs in Tehran had a big poster on a wall of a building with Netanyahu leaning over an upside down map of the world with upside down tanks, and he looks all shabby and with a helmet not fastened to his chin. And they said something like Netanyahu's politics push him to war, or whatever they said, something to that effect. And it sounds exactly like the anti-Netanyahu protest. It's just exactly the same message. So I think people are getting tired of the fact that while the government is conducting an existential war, the Kaplan forces are conducting a war against the government. And Israelis have I guess only the third left of the spectrum is still buying the fact that the war against Netanyahu is more important than the war against Iran, Hamas, and Hezbollah. So I want to put that in parentheses. If you have any comment about that before we move to the deep state.
Just a short one. I met the mother of a hostage, and she said, when asked whether she met with other parents of hostages and relatives of hostages, and was that of any comfort to her? And she said, yes, it's of great comfort and it's really worthwhile, as long as it's in groups of four or less. But once it gets bigger than that, then politics intervenes and it becomes intolerable. I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, and I think she's right. So what is happening in court now is incredibly interesting. Let me just lay the background for it. We have the most radical extremist judiciary today. The chief of the judiciary, we call him president, what you would call a chief justice, has basically appointed himself. As you remember, he could only be appointed by a committee convened by the Minister of Justice, who refused to convene the committee before considering his conflicts of interest, the candidate for the Supreme Court president. And the court ordered the committee to convene without the minister and appointed our Chief Justice illegally, basically. And ever since, they've been trampling over the law just with no even the appearance of moderation, and nothing at all. For instance, there is the head of the civil service.
Your cat is making an appearance.
Yeah, she likes that because she searches where she could intercept the attention, and she found it. She just, מרקי, עוד טיפה לתוך הפריים. That's it. Brilliant. So that's one of my cats. So the Supreme Court decided to intervene in something completely against the law. The law says that the cabinet is entitled to appoint the head of the civil service without, you call it tender, without מכרז.
I don't know that we would call it tender is when you're putting out a contract for companies, for
So the parallel in the civil service where you have a competitive sort of procedure for appointments.
Yeah.
So there's a committee and there you have to have applications. So the law says that in this case, the cabinet can appoint him. And so the Supreme Court decided that this is no longer so. So explicitly against the law, they made a new interpretation by which they said that it's not right, that there's no competition for this job and there should be one. So they don't interpret the law, they rewrite it. So they are very extreme, and now they're dealing with a very sensitive issue. And the sensitive issue is a head of Shabak in the midst of a war. The prime minister needs a head of Shabak. He cannot work with Ronen Bar, who's been undermining him. And Ronen Bar, as you remember, preemptively began the Qatar Gate investigation, which is a sham investigation, I think, against some of Netanyahu's aides. And so what happened is the law clearly says that the cabinet can appoint the head of Shabak, and everybody understands the prime minister needs a man he would trust as head of Shabak. But now the Attorney General, the all-powerful Attorney General of Israel, Gali Ba'arav Miara, Mrs. Gali Ba'arav Miara, decided that the cabinet this time cannot appoint the head of Shabak because Netanyahu is in a conflict of interests. He's a conflict of interest because there is a Qatar Gate investigation going on, and he can't find another head for the agency that is investigating him. Although they're not investigating him, they're investigating some of their aides.
This is right out of the playbook between Comey and Trump. It's amazing.
Absolutely, it is exactly the same thing. Ronen Bar, in my opinion, just studied it well, and he taught it to Gali Ba'arav Miara. There are other conflicts of interest. They're all friends, all these leftist circles, and so now this. Of course, the problem of the conflict of interest can be solved, and the cabinet suggested a way to solve it. It said someone else will make the pick. Someone else suggested, another kind of someone else suggested that the investigation of the Qatar Gate will be transferred to the police so that it can go on unimpeded. But the Supreme Court would have none of this, and they decided to intervene in this. Now, there have been, if you looked at Israeli social media, you would see people were furious. There was a brilliant little video clip by an up-and-coming star on the right-wing media she calls herself Dana Banana, which is exactly as you hear it in Hebrew. It's Dana Banana, and she made she says, what is more important than appointing the head of Shabak in the midst of a war? Well, I'll tell you what's more important, because these are the things that the chief of the Supreme Court decided to debate, to accept for adjudication in the Supreme Court. And there are all these complaints from Palestinians and human rights NGOs. So during the time of the war, there was a lull in the court proceedings because it was an emergency. So they postponed some of the debates. So they postponed the head of the Shabak debate, but not these complaints from human rights organizations. So that was itself controversial. But the chief of the Supreme Court found a new way to impose his extreme agenda. And the way he did this is that he can control the Herkev,
framework,
the composition of the panel of judges who will debate anything. And he has one real extreme activist. Her name is Daphna Barak Erez. And then he takes a moderate kippah-wearing settler, a very nice, well-mannered person called Noam Solberg. And what he did was he always has the dissenting opinion of Noam Solberg, but he appoints a panel of three, and they can always, and then he controls it, and then they take all the wild decisions. What happened is Solberg decided not to play this game anymore. And my guess is that this is because both Ran Baratz, whom you know, Dr. Ran Baratz, a former aide of Netanyahu and a brilliant publicist and an intellectual, and Amit Segal, whom you also know, the journalists, they both made real fun of Solberg. You know, Solberg always, it was painful for him. Always, it was terrible for him. And he wrote these descending opinion, rolling descending opinion, but he was the fig leaf for this charade. And I think they managed to shame him into quitting. And now what happened is that the Yitzhak Amit, the president of the court, is stuck without the ability to create these trio that does what he thinks, what he wants. So he was pushed. I'm not sure why he decided to choose two other judges. He can't enlarge the panel because he won't have a majority. So he chose a panel of three. And I guess he trusted these not to descend like Noam Solberg. These are Judge Knafi Steinitz, that's her name, and Judge Stein. And they rebelled. When the Attorney General came with her conflict of interest argument, both these judges said, but the law is very clear on this, and this is not such a big problem. And then what erupted in court is that parents, bereaved parents of dead soldiers, just began drowning out Yitzhak Amit and shouting at him. And he just, with a shocking lack of sensitivity, just kicked them out. He ordered the security to just take them out. And that was something, you know, very difficult for Israelis to see. Like we know these characters, we know these people, we know their pain, we know who their dead sons and daughters were. I interviewed Galia Choshen, who was taken out of court. She's the mother of this wonderful young. You would see her face, you'd cry. This bright young girl who was murdered at the Nova, and she wanted her voice heard, and she said, and what are they angry at, Mike? They're angry at a Supreme Court that is being political and putting obstacles in the government's drive to win this war. We need a head of Shabak.
When you play politics at that level, then you're going to be held accountable politically. So
exactly, and the court does not understand it. They have accustomed themselves to authority without accountability. And suddenly he has these screaming mothers and fathers in his court, and they took them out forcefully. And these pictures were unbelievably jarring. And of course, the left-wing media suddenly described these bereaved parents as wild hooligans of Bibists and, you know, deplorables. And that too didn't go well with a lot of the audience. So what happened now is that, what did Amit do? He postponed the discussion because he was going to lose it. So the government was going to be able to appoint Zini, and he wouldn't have it because there they are. There's no other way to interpret it. They are part of the anti-Netanyahu coalition.
So what you're saying, though, really is that you're seeing the moral high ground has shifted enormously. Both the Netanyahu at Nahal Oz, as you just described it, and this episode, they're really on the defensive now.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you're saying they're so out of touch that they don't know they're on the defensive. They sense it a little bit, but they don't really know what to do about it.
I think so, and this is the Archimedean point, because if Daphne Barak Erez is out, and the Supreme Court president cannot be, look, there are only the court is comprised only of activists. There are crazy radical activists and mildly crazy activists. That's the whole difference. But this this fell on the exact rift between the mildly crazy and the really crazy, and look what is happening, because the power of the Attorney General is only supported by a radical Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court is not able to assemble radical enough panels, then the Attorney General has lost her power, and the government of Israel will begin to take sovereignty back. So it's not just a question of the moral high ground; it's also a structural question of the pyramid of authority.
But you have to explain to us how Donald Trump's tweets about the Netanyahu trial play into all of this.
Yeah, they play into this as background, and as a shift in the climate, because it doesn't bear directly on the judges. Certainly not the judges now debating the Netanyahu's case in court, because just to remind our listeners, Donald Trump's tweets are about the Netanyahu trial and how these judges are dragging Netanyahu into court at least twice, if not three times a week for 6 hours while he's supposed to conduct a war. And they think they laid a very clever trap for him, Mike, because they said in the beginning of the trial, well, this trial, you can't postpone it because of the public interest. And Netanyahu said, I'm running the war. And so the Attorney General, the courts, and I mean, there are circles, and their spokespeople in the press said, well, in that case, you have to quit the premiership so you can defend yourself in court. So just think how crazy extreme this is. The scheduling of two district judges in Tel Aviv is supposed to override the election of a democracy, so that Netanyahu has to quit, because obviously he has to appear to his own defense in court, and we can't postpone it because it's the public interest. So the public interest is the scheduling of the court, not the conducting of the war. And faced with a choice, he should choose his trial, of course. But of course he wouldn't. So Trump just created the atmosphere in which, the echo chamber was suddenly invaded by a huge voice, or as you say, huge, by a huge voice coming from the outside saying, you are all crazy. And suddenly, everybody woke up, and all these Lilliputians who are trying to tie up the Netanyahu Gulliver suddenly seemed really stupid when looked at from the outside. So I think that created the atmosphere in which Yitzhak Amit also appears like the Red Queen from Alice in Wonderland, shouting, off with his hand! And suddenly people look at this and say, this is not right. So what happened is, this combined with the bereaved parents has created an atmosphere in which the two judges sitting with Yitzhak Amit suddenly found themselves having trouble siding with Yitzhak Amit in the court of public opinion. So this may be a turning point. It may not be, but it may be a turning point.
Until there's a structural change, they can just go to ground for a while and wait and then come back.
Yeah, but it's not clear that they can play bureaucratic games endlessly in the midst of the war. There is a report which we should discuss one day of how much the court sabotaged Israel's security by looking up and sideways at The Hague, attempting to find favor with anti-Semitic judges, and by bending ourselves backwards and putting more and more restrictions on Israel's conducting of the war, which costs us lives. I think we talked about it in the episode that never appeared, and that I'll just mention briefly and not open a new discussion.
We call it the lost episode.
The lost episode. Good. At least not the lost cause, Mike. That's better. So what happened is, I don't know if it was on the lost episode or somewhere else, is that the 4 soldiers were killed one Friday because of the restrictions by the Attorney General of the Army against bombing the building from the air for fear of collateral damage. And of course, it makes sense to make collateral damage a consideration. But here in Israel, most of us believe that the restrictions imposed in the name of collateral damage are costing too many lives of our own soldiers.
Right.
I hate to do this to you, Mike, but I think we need to move to the next segment.
It's completely in your
So
hands, Gadi.
Gaza,
You make
Gaza.
all the decisions.
Yeah, sure. We're like a married couple, and now the wife just said, "Oh, you make all the decisions, but don't you dare." So now that you are the wife, Mike,
We had a
you have
discussion
the
about that in
authority.
we had a discussion about that in my family, and my daughters. I actually wasn't present. My wife had a discussion with my daughters, and she was trying to defer responsibility for some decision onto me. And my daughters said, "Come on, Mom, we know who really runs this family." So I shouldn't tell that story because I
You
just
shouldn't.
emasculated myself, didn't I? Cut it out, Gotti. Cut this segment out. What are we talking about, Gaza? So there's a very interesting article in. Look, we have to have two segments on Gaza here. We'll say Gaza and geopolitics, and then when we talk about the next one about Netanyahu and Washington, about Gaza between the United States and uh, and uh, the prime minister. Gotti, I am struggling to keep up with everything that's going on in the region. There are so many changes happening so quickly, and everyone is absorbing the consequences of the Israeli-American victory over Iran. And I do think it was a major victory. That it's really hard to keep up with what everyone is thinking. There's a very interesting article in Israel Hayom today saying that the Saudi policy has totally shifted. Now, this is just one article, and I haven't verified it yet with anyone, but it kind of makes sense to me logically that this is the case, that the Saudis, according to this article by Dani Zakin, maybe? Don't
Yeah,
know him.
yeah.
Is that a
Danny Zakin, he was head of Galatz, the army radio, for a while. He's a
so
veteran
so
journalist.
veteran journalist, respected? You respect him?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So it's a very interesting article because what he says is that when Donald Trump went over to Saudi Arabia, he told Mohammed bin Salman that he really wanted to move towards Saudi-Israeli normalization. And Mohammed bin Salman told him, irreversible pathway to a two-state solution. Things have changed since the war and so on. And Trump said, well, that's what I'd really like. And then the Saudis saw the Israelis become a regional power or exercise their power regionally against the Saudis' number one enemy. And Zakin reveals there that the Saudis opened airspace to Israel, I think mainly for the defense. But and it's something that I kind of assumed
They
was going
said on
on.
they said on the press here that the Saudis actually intercepted drones.
And but also allowed Israelis into. I think this is more significant. They allowed Israeli aircraft into this. This is what I understood Zakin to be saying into Saudi Arabia in order to intercept drones.
They actually had them land in Saudi Arabia
I know. I think they operated over Saudi
over
territory.
airspace. Yeah.
That's what I understood it to be. I don't want to, but this we'll have to verify and find out. But it's very interesting. I knew by the nature of the American uh, anti missile, air and missile defense system that the sensors and interceptors in Jordan and Saudi Arabia are very important. So I assumed that was going on, but opening their airspace to Israelis, that's a whole nother level. And they then, of course, by doing that, they also took a risk that they might become a target of Iranian counterattacks. So that's interesting. But now that their rival Iran has been diminished significantly, according to Zakin, this is just one report. their calculations have changed, and they are willing to become more involved in Gaza, in Gaza reconstruction, and the day after questions. And what Donald Trump is saying to them is he wants a total package. He doesn't want just a Gaza solution and a Syria solution and so on and so forth. He wants a total, a new, he wants to be credit for creating a new regional order. And he wants Saudi Arabia to have a pride of place in that order. And so this is going to be the subject of the discussion when Netanyahu comes next week. Of course, the Gaza deal has yet to be accepted by Hamas. And as I said in the news, Trump is threatening Hamas that if they don't accept it, there will be dire consequences for Hamas. There's apparently a split in the leadership of Hamas between those who want to take a deal and those who don't want to take the deal.
You mean the remains of the leadership of Hamas?
The remains, yeah, the fragmented remains of the fragmented remains of Hamas are fragmented, so anyway. We have to see. Presumably, there will be a deal when Prime Minister Netanyahu arrives. But there's also this debate
if
going
Hamas,
on.
This is not a small caveat. If Hamas agrees, they haven't
Hamas
so
agrees.
far.
But there's also quite a bitter debate going on inside Israel about all this. With Netanyahu saying very clearly, we are not. He couldn't be clearer. He said, I think today or yesterday, in Ashkelon, that we are not going back to the old framework where we have a ceasefire, we get some of the prisoners back or all the prisoners back, and then Hamas remains in power in Gaza. We're going to get all the prisoners back, and Hamas is going down. This is what he's saying, and he said, "I'll stake my career on this." So
yeah, here are the two interpretations of this, and I'll leave both on the table. One interpretation, some of the generals and former generals. I mean, they're all former. They're all reserve generals. The one I spoke to and sat on panels with and interviewed on my Hebrew podcast. Some of them are saying the army is still not doing what it is commanded to do. And because of the limitations of the Attorney General and also the unit in charge of bringing back the hostages, the army is still holding back. And so the remains of the leadership of Hamas are entrenched in Gaza City, which is in the north of Gaza and has not been evacuated as the original plan stated. And also some of the aid is reaching Gaza City. So they're sitting in the middle of Gaza City, protected by the hostages and their own population. And the army is not doing what the plan was. And there was a heated exchange between the new chief of staff, Eyal Zamir, and Bezalel Smotrich in the cabinet, and audaciously, the General Zamir said to the cabinet, well, if you want me to go there, give me an order to risk the lives of hostages. And some of the cabinet, according to leaks from the cabinet, some of the cabinet ministers were outraged by this statement. They said, do we also need to tell you to risk the lives of soldiers when you go somewhere with your army? General, lives are in danger when you operate. There is a lot of demagoguery going on around this because General Nitzan Alon, who is in charge, who is clearly on the anti-Netanyahu side with Ronen Bar and the former chief of staff Herzi, is using the hostage issue in order to limit the action of the IDF. And why? Because these people don't, the thing they want to prevent is the occupation of the Gaza Strip that will prevent the return to the two-state solution. That is their agenda. And they're saying you can't go there. He can draw a circle and say you can't go there because you're risking the hostages. And Nitzan Alon himself in the media said last time was Rafah, and when we went into Rafah, they murdered 6 hostages. And apparently, that is a very manipulative way of saying what happened, because we know from hostages who have been released that their lives were not in danger when the IDF got nearer, because they were the guarantee for the security of the Hamas jailers. So, contrary to what they say, this is not how Hamas behaved. Why did they execute the 6 hostages? Told me General or Brigadier General, Reserve Brigadier General Erez Wiener. By the end of this war, Mike, we will know the translations between Hebrew and English of the army ranks. So, Brigadier General Wiener, who is the guy who planned the Gideon chariots operation now going on in Gaza, he said to me, this is all a manipulation, because the 6 hostages were the 6 hostages protecting Sinwar himself. So everywhere he went with these 6 hostages, and he executed them when he felt they were a burden on his agility, on his ability to move from spot to spot. So this is where we are. This is one interpretation of what is going on, and that interpretation say Netanyahu is not able to impose his opinion on these unruly generals, and so he's going to Washington, and he will return with American backing, which is exactly the opposite of what was going on during the Biden administration, right, Mike?
Oh, that's very interesting, because the Israeli press is full of stories saying that Trump is bringing him there to discipline him. So that really Trump is on the side of those who just want to bring this to a quick end, and not on Netanyahu's side. So they're twisting it. Well, probably.
They're probably twisting it, but these things are not necessarily black and white. So Trump wants to end the war.
Yeah, he's got his agenda.
The press here celebrates every time that they can imagine a rift between Trump and Netanyahu. And so I wouldn't trust their interpretation, but there could be a complex game here. The other side, the other interpretation, which I've heard from other analysts and journalists whose opinion I respect, who said no, Netanyahu is repeating the war's aims, because now what he is saying is there will not be a resettling of Gaza. There will be no annexation. And about immigration out of Gaza, that is something we will discuss later. So he is minimizing expectations by repeating the aims of the war, which he can possibly achieve without military force. So if Trump can stitch together a deal in which the remnants of Hamas will be exiled or executed or whatever, defeated, and an international force with the Saudis, the Egyptians, possibly the Qataris, others will put in men, money, boots on the ground, and will help reconstruct Gaza in another way, then they say the aims of the war will have been achieved. Hamas will not remain in power and be dismantled as a military force. The hostages to the last will be returned, and Gaza would not again be a threat to Israel. And they point out at the unbelievable destruction of Gaza, which our friend Dan Shiftan said about, I think it was 2 months after the war. He said, pay attention to the destruction in Gaza, because this is the lesson that Israel is teaching anyone who would mess with us. And I remember having an argument with him and saying that this may not be a deterrent, because this is just brick and mortar that could be repaired. People will have employment in the construction business, and Hamas will only be deterred if a territory will be lost, because this is against their theological beliefs. So it remains to be seen. What do you think of the second interpretation?
I want to say 2 things here. One is that, as I said when we started, I'm I'm not sure of any of my interpretations right now because everything has changed so quickly, and every major factor in the region, Saudis, Iranians, Turks, Americans, Israelis, they're all recalibrating simultaneously, and it's hard to know where it's all going to fall, where it's all going to fall out, and it's also hard to know what's true and what's not true. If we had had this interpretation about Saudi Arabia playing such a role, uh, 6 months ago, I would have said nonsense. Remember, we on this program time and time again, we said the American press and the Israeli press, the Biden administration and the opponents of Netanyahu, the political opponents of Netanyahu, have created this fiction that there's a Saudi-Israeli normalization that awaits if only Netanyahu will stop the war right now and recognize a role for the Palestinian Authority in the day after on Gaza. Remember, this whole question about day after came up, and this whole fictive notion of a Saudi-Israeli new Saudi-Israeli dawn and a alliance against led by the United States together with Saudi Arabia and Israel against Iran was raised, and that was all nonsense. But now I don't think it's such nonsense. I think the defeat by Iran, by the combined
The
arms
defeat of Iran.
of Iran, by the combined arms of the United States and Israel, has really changed the calculations of a lot of actors, and we'll have to wait and see. I wanted to say that something tangential here, which I should have said last time. You mentioned how the press gets so excited every time there's tension between Netanyahu and Trump. It's really important to point out here, I think, with regard to that Netanyahu and Trump use that to deceive the Iranians. I mean, all of
Yeah.
these guys in the Israeli press saying that Trump has abandoned Netanyahu. He won't. He's finally
Yeah.
despaired of doing it. They use that. They use that to put all of the Iranian generals and nuclear scientists to bed quietly in their homes, so they can sleep soundly. In the assurance that the United States and Israel were not going to work, that the United States
And
was
the
going to
press said,
restrain.
and the press said, not before Avner Netanyahu's wedding,
Yeah.
which was supposed to take it was supposed to take place 3 days before.
So
Yeah, but they played the press. It's
they
unbelievable.
played the press, but there's another thing, Gadi, that we have to realize here. What this did to the brains of all of the Middle Eastern leaders, because they thought there was this tension between Netanyahu and Trump. They didn't imagine that Netanyahu and Trump were scheming to deceive them together. And then all of a sudden, that's what happened, right? That was what was revealed. So think about what this does to the mind of the minds of leaders across the region. They say, "Wow, the Americans and the Israeli, Netanyahu and Trump, they are really scheming together in ways that we couldn't have imagined," and it's really fascinating, actually. And I'm among those who believe that there were real tensions between Netanyahu and Trump. I don't believe that this was all planned out perfectly and one big game. I think it was a little more complex than that.
Yeah,
But there's
they're essentially on the same side.
ultimately they're on the same side. Ultimately,
Yeah,
that's the
This,
point.
you know
And
where
this
Netanyahu came the closest to reveal this is when Yair Lapid made a joke of himself. Yeah, exactly. That motion with the hand. When
yeah.
Yair Lapid shouted, "You know what you did? The Israeli relationship with the United States has never been worse. Trump has abandoned you." And Netanyahu is smiling from his seat in the parliament
You have to
and
tell
doing this
everybody what
motion.
this. You have to tell me what this
This
gesture
mean it's
means.
not in Italy. It means I'm gonna, I'm gonna. I have no. I can't think of a non-expletive to explain what it is in Italian. I'm gonna screw you really seriously. But in Israel, it just means just you wait, which is
Yeah,
close. It's
patience.
just you
Have a
wait
little
without the
patience.
violence.
Hold on.
Yeah, have a little
Hold your
patience.
horses. Hold your
Hold
horses.
on. This is why
Hold
if you
on, and
go
you'll
to
see.
Italy, if you go to Italy and someone taps your shoulder and you do this because you're Israeli, you just mean wait, and you can get a knock, you can get a punch to
The
your face for doing it in Italy.
I'm not sure that everyone who's listening to us or watching us saw the clip because the clip is so funny to see after the fact when because they're in the Knesset. Lapid is attacking Netanyahu and saying that relations between the United States and Israel have never been at such a nadir.
Nadir.
Is a nadir is the low point, or is the apex nadir?
Nadir
Anyway,
is the low point. Yeah.
at such a low point. And Netanyahu is laughing. He's just giggling, and he's making this gesture saying, "Just wait, just wait." Okay.
And it's a real joke, and it just goes to show. I mean, Lapid is just a complete amateur, and all his calculations were wrong ever since he decided not to join the cabinet in the beginning of the war. By the way, Mike, I just returned from the Channel 14, as I said, and on the panel sat Shlomo Filber, who is Channel 14's poster, and he's amazing, and he just vindicated everything that we've been saying in this show, because now the Gantz party is falling apart. So the headline
I was just gonna go ahead. I was gonna say something about this. Go ahead.
So the title of the segment was "Why is everyone deserting Gantz?" And he just described it so well, that Gantz was assigned the role of the exact opposite of his character and heart, which was to topple Netanyahu, while his instinct is the instinct of consensus. Yeah. And he explained exactly what we've been saying on this show, how people thought that because he was rising in the polls, he can challenge Netanyahu, but he was rising in the polls because he didn't challenge Netanyahu in the midst of a war. And now he's been deserted by Gadi Eisenkot, his second in command, and interesting things are in the making, and we shall discuss them in the future, because if Gadi Eisenkot now saves Lapid from political destruction, they are going to resurrect the party. This is the other cat, by the way. They are going to resurrect.
But what I was gonna bring this up because so I put it in the news.
So just to say, so people can follow us, Mike. So just explain what I just said, so people can understand.
But hold on, Eisenkot is going to Bennett now. No, isn't that what we're?
It's not clear. It's not clear.
Because what I think is funny here is that it's been so clear for the last 2 or 3 months that after remember, we tracked here the whole Gantz, Eisenkot, Biden plan for last summer. They were going to bring down Netanyahu last summer. There was a whole plan, and we tracked it, and it fell apart. And so the new plan is to turn Bennett into the not Netanyahu, and so there's all of there are all of these changes going on to resurrect Bennett and use him as the instrument to bring down Netanyahu. And while there was all this tension pseudo tension, whatever, between Netanyahu and Trump, there was poll after poll after poll, push polls put out in the Israeli press saying if Bennett starts a new party, he'll take down Netanyahu and so on. And then it all fell apart, just like the what I think is funny, if in fact Eisenkot is going to Bennett, like Eisenkot is a perfect bellwether of whatever of the next failed plan, right? Because he always picks the loser, like 5 minutes after that you can see that it's going to be a loser. You got to describe the Israeli social media is full of all these memes now with Bennett that are hilarious.
Yeah.
Bennett in the 6-day war, Bennett whispering in Herzl's ear.
Yeah. So we have to. I actually had one. I mean, I picked it up and I just added a caption, but Bennett took Bennett and Lapid, but Lapid is already such a joke that people are not taking it seriously. But Bennett said that the attack on Iran could not have happened if not the decision that his government had taken in their brief tenure. Of course, Lapid exaggerated all this because truth is not an impediment to his rhetorical flair. And he said, when I entered government, the drawers were empty. There were no plans for any. Netanyahu was talking about this for 40 years, but Bennett said the decisions
nobody ever thought about Iran before Lapid
Lapid came, the genius. And so, well, when Bennett took credit for the attack in Iran, which is Netanyahu's been beating this horse for 40 years now. So the whole of internet erupted with memes about Bennett. The last one I saw is Bennett is the serpent in the Garden of Eden, offering an apple to Eve. But that's a mean one. The one I put that got a lot of reactions was Bennett in a suit walking by Neil Armstrong, and on the moon, and I said. And the caption said, "Small step for Bennett, giant leap for humanity." But people had him as the Mona Lisa. People had him in a suit with this bunch of Neanderthals, and he offered them the wheel. And there were hundreds of them. I can't even remember all of them, but one of them, as you mentioned, was the famous picture of the paratroopers at the Wailing Wall when the Wailing Wall was liberated in '67, and Bennett is among them there. So they put him everything. They put him with Ben Gurion and Herzl writing the Declaration of Independence. They put him everywhere, and he became a joke. But Bennett aside, Lapid, if Lapid said that he will not insist on being number one in his party. That's a novelty because he disallowed primaries so far. And when he did, grudgingly, he took care that he will not be really challenged. People were thrown out of the party for challenging him for primaries before, like Ofer Shelach is number two for a long time. So the calculation is, and this is what Shlomo Filber, the pollster, said. Um, um, he said that there is an electorate of the Yesh Atid Lapid party who are the shallow middle Israel secular uh, middle class, and they don't, these voters don't know where to go, and Lapid is maybe not is maybe falling under the threshold because he miscalculated so badly when he didn't put his shoulder under the stretcher, as we said, in the coalition that was fighting the war. So Eisen caught maybe the perfect match to be number one for the Lapid number two in order to return the voters. And Eisenkot has not been so badly bruised because he joined the cabinet with Gantz, and he was the one apparently to pull Gantz out of the cabinet, which caused Gantz to collapse. And so now Gantz is left with something in the polls, something like 7 seats. He had 33 at the height of his career, which was when he was in the cabinet, when he joined the coalition. So that's where that stays.
I just realized that I stole something here, and I have a friend, Avnet Kleiner. You don't know him, but he sent me some comments on our last episode, and then he said, and by the way, tell Gadi that the Israeli mainstream media deserves a medal. They were an active part of the greatest deception operation in modern history, before and especially after October 7th. I realized after I mentioned it like it was my idea that he's the one who gave me that idea. So there, Avnet Kleiner gets credit for that.
It would be brilliant if we could move to the segment of listeners' comments now, but we can't.
We should say a few words. You got to say a few words about Netanyahu and Washington.
I thought we did. Did we not?
We kind of did. I know we've said a lot. Maybe just move on to readers' comments, should we?
No, but because we have. Now I have vetoed the passing to a new segment because we have the dumb mistake before that.
Oh, dumb mistake. Okay.
I have a horrendous dumb mistake. So why don't we start on the light side with you?
Yeah, my dumb mistake is really, really simple. No, I got to find it here. Where did it go? It is that it's just a headline I saw in Newsweek, which made me laugh. Here it is. The headline is husband refuses to take down Trump flags after his wife is detained by ICE. And the first line of the article is, a supporter of President Donald Trump has refused to take down MAGA flags outside his home, even though federal agents arrested his Iranian wife. And I just thought there is a different interpretation to this. Maybe he's very happy that they arrested his Iranian wife.
I had
Solved a lot of problems for him.
I had the same thought exactly, Mike, because I thought this is a lot like Netanyahu, the intervention in the Netanyahu trial.
Sorry, you lost me there. Which intervention?
Trump intervened to save Netanyahu. Maybe now he's intervened to save that husband from his wife.
Yeah, it could. Oh, so Trump did that. Yes, could well be. I also just thought it was funny that they actually published an article about some guy with Trump flags. Like this is why is that news? Who cares? Anyway, but okay, go ahead.
So my dumbest take is actually the craziest take on the news, and I'm going to show you live a segment of Mika AlMog, who is the granddaughter of Shimon Peres, in an anti-Netanyahu rally, and it's I'm going to leave it untranslated, and then I'm going to say something about what she said. But even if you don't understand Hebrew, you will be able to feel the vibrations of her voice. So, Mike, let me share screen and run this segment for you. Here.
הבנות והבנים האלה, דור המדבקות, בני 19 או 22, הם לא נפלו. הם אפילו לא נהרגו. הם נשחטו. הוקרבו קורבן למולך, כדי שאימא של אבנר תוכל לתפור סמלה לחתונה. כדי שתוכל לפזר גופות של ילדים כמו עלי כותרת בדרך לחופה. הם הוקרבו כדי שאבא של יאיר יוכל למזוג את דמם כמו שמפניה אדומה ולשתות אותו בתאווה לחיי המשך שלטונו הרקוב, המעוות, הרצחני.
Wow.
Did
wow.
just
wow.
now.
Wow, that is I have to say I was totally disgusted. I'm used to hearing this anti-Netanyahu rhetoric, but this takes it to a whole nother level. I mean,
yeah, and this is a rally. This is not some private conversation. So it just gives you an idea.
You gotta translate it for our.
Yeah, I will. But I just want to say that this is caused by the press. The press, who has demonized Netanyahu for so long, some people would just will take it to that extreme. So what she said is the soldiers killed in Gaza were not fallen. The term naflu. They were not even just killed. They were sacrificed to Moloch, so that Sarah Netanyahu could saw a wedding dress for herself, a dress for her son's wedding, so she can put children's corpses as petal leaves on the aisle to the chuppah, to the wedding ceremony, so that her husband, the father of Yair, could drink the blood of soldiers like pink champagne. That is an allusion to the trial, to support his corrupt tyranny. So these people have gone beyond deranged. This have nothing to do with politics. This is a psychiatric mass phenomenon that is Trump derangement syndrome. There are people like that in the United States, and we look at it as a joke. But these people, the fact that an intelligent woman who has obviously very good Hebrew and can write metaphors thinks that this is even a thought that that it is legitimate to say to a crowd that Netanyahu drinks the blood of soldiers. So if you people who are listening to us in America don't understand what these extremists did to Israeli society, to its solidarity, to the cohesion of our politics, this is what they did. Because I don't count.
You're telling me that she's the granddaughter of Shimon Peres.
She is the granddaughter of Shimon Peres. So this is not someone.
So she's also, just not just some crazy, but well, she might be crazy. I don't know anything about her, but somebody who grew up in the Israeli establishment and has been around politics and.
Absolutely. And this is what Israel's elite did with these crazy demonstrations. People, when you talk to some people about Netanyahu, they become like zombies, like hypnotized zombies. And what the manipulators and the strategists, as they're called, political strategists, did to a whole segment of the public, which I have to say, the anti-Netanyahu protesters belong to the upper echelon of Israeli society, of the educated classes, and their political literacy is the lowest in Israeli society. You can get any argument passes with these people, including the idiotic Qatar gates and other things. And this is a real danger to politics because democracies rely on rational political argument and rational disagreement. And they also rely, as Henry Kissinger kept reminding us, on the idea of a loyal opposition. And these people think of Netanyahu as the enemy. Israel is fighting an existential war. Netanyahu is leading it. And when you think these people want us to lose to Iran, it's because they read in Haaretz, and Haaretz columnists say that after we defeat the crazy mullahs of Iran, we will have to defeat our own crazy government. This is an actual article in this poisonous newspaper called the Haaretz.
But I have to tell our readers, our viewers, that you have a conflict of interest with regard to Haaretz.
Even worse than Netanyahu's.
Because you used to have a column with them, and they discontinued your column.
Yeah, discontinued is a nice word.
And the publisher often tweets nasty things about you.
He also tweeted nasty things about me when I did write for the paper. And Mike,
right.
Yeah, I hear this all the time. So I have no problem with the conflict of interest. I'll just say I was attacking Haaretz before I started writing for them. Yeah. When I started writing for them, I kept attacking them, only I said the left-wing press instead of saying Haaretz, because you cannot slander a paper while writing in it, and I accept this. But they have also gone off to the extreme end, and this is why they fired me. So it's not just that I have some personal grudge, although I do. The Haaretz is the most quoted source among anti-Semites about Israel.
No, this all has an impact over here. If you listen to the garbage that Steve Bannon is putting out, he's saying that this whole war with Iran was so Netanyahu can save his seat. This has nothing to do with nuclear weapons. This has nothing to do with the American interests. This is just so one man can hold on to his seat and, drink the blood of soldiers like red champagne.
Just to make it more interesting, I've been often attacked in Israel for interviewing Steve Bannon in Haaretz. They were it was hilarious because they were so thrilled. They were so thrilled. They were so thrilled that they have an interview with the actual devil, that they actually ran a piece of the photographer that they sent to photograph Steve Bannon for the interview. And the title, I think, was "This is how I felt when photographing Steve Bannon," or something of that sort. I didn't think Steve Bannon then told me that he's a Christian Zionist. I think he's an interesting character, but he's very unstable. And other than that,
blows like the wind, man. Blows like the he's seduced by power. Forget it.
And not only that, his estimate of his own intellect is about 70% off. And what I remember from these days is that I was doing the research. He's not a racist, as people often claim. I didn't think he was anti-Semitic. I think that now he's not anti-Semitic, but just stupid about Israel and catering to anti-Semites. But the stupidest,
he's spreading anti-Semitic arguments. So
yeah, I agree. I'm not going to defend him. I'm just going to say that
I don't care what's in his heart. He's spreading garbage,
that he was stupid enough to go to the left-wing press to try to impress them by saying that he is the mind behind Trump. And then Trump kicked him out because there's no chief in the universe who agrees to anyone running around saying, "I'm the mind behind all this." So I just think Steve Bannon is not a big deal. He's like, I think he's a marginal character, but I
No, I
agree
think
that
all
his
this,
damage is
no, the stuff
is,
that he and Tucker Carlson are pushing, and it's not just them. I think it's serious and damaging. And anyway, we'll talk about
and
that later.
dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah, very dangerous. And there's a whole group of young people, including young people working for the Trump administration, that are buying this crap. That's why it's dangerous.
There was actually a
Okay.
poll saying that the general public is not buying that stuff, and that
No,
about
the
90% to
likely
5% of
voters.
Republicans were for the
Yeah,
American intervention.
the United States is a pro-Israel country, and it's against Iran, and it's against Iran having nuclear weapons. So, okay, shall we move on to readers' comments?
Please do.
I don't want to be okay. So we have one. It wasn't on a comment to the video, but on Twitter from Susie Shofar, and you know who that is.
Yeah.
And she said, anyone who doesn't like Mike, that's me, by the way, I'm Mike, is retarded. You can check. It's true. I highly recommend subscribing to his and Gadi Taub's Tablet Magazine Israel Update podcast. So, Gadi, this is a no retard zone here, an NRZ. Okay.
How about people who don't like Gadi? What about them?
Oh, there's a lot of them. I spare you from all the comments.
No, I was referring to Susie Shofar. What does she think of people who don't like Gadi? Are they also retarded? Or they're just slightly off?
That's a good question. That's a good question. We'll have to wait. I'm sure we'll get an answer to that. Okay, now
shall we change the title or our tagline to "I like Mike"?
No.
Is that not catchy?
No.
I
like. First of all,
it was a very successful TV series.
I don't know why you don't like the tagline. As sane as possible under the circumstances. That is the tagline.
I told you.
Yeah, even though you don't like it, I don't care. That is our tagline. I will accept as an alternative a no retard zone. And if you want it to be a little softer, we'll call it the NRZ. Welcome to the NRZ. Okay?
That's like Chaz, isn't it? Do you remember Chaz?
Out in Seattle. You're
Seattle,
talking about.
Yeah.
I forgot what Chaz stood for. The something zone.
Something retard zone.
Okay. Okay. Highly informative. Thanks, Mike. Especially, can you in a future podcast discuss Azerbaijan, Armenia, Russia, and how their interplay relates to Iran going forward? I believe pipeline politics is an important aspect, but there are others as well, like Iran's backing of Armenia and ongoing Turkish and Israeli military support for Azerbaijan. Complicated puzzle I can't untangle. We will do that. We can't do it now. It's fascinating. There's really interesting stuff going on in that arena right now. Lots of tension between Russia and Azerbaijan. And Gadi, I don't know if I said it here. It's very interesting. There's tension right now between Azerbaijan and Turkey over, quietly behind the scenes, not publicly, over Armenia, Azerbaijan. Have I talked about this?
Not since the Nagorno-Karabakh affair.
No, we don't say Nagorno-Karabakh. That's you put yourself on the wrong side. Karabakh.
Oh, Karabakh. Sorry. Yeah.
Karabakh, Azerbaijan, dear. Do you not know this? Karabakh is Azerbaijan.
I got into trouble for saying that discussing Turkey, Azerbaijan, and Iran based on stuff produced by Hudson, your articles and Zineb's articles. And I said that they have a common border. And I said that also about Azerbaijan and Turkey. And someone said, no, Turkey and Azerbaijan don't have a border. And I said, oh, right. And
you're right.
I'm geographically dyslexic. They do. They have 10 kilometers of a border, a tiny border.
Yeah. Tell you, whoever said that to you, go back and look again.
So I was mistakenly right.
Yes. Yeah. You should just be very confident and style it out. Okay. So, but the interesting thing is that the Turks, Erdogan wants a peace agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and the Azerbaijanis are dragging their feet. They want certain concessions from Armenia first, and so there's tension because what Erdogan wants to hand a peace agreement to Donald Trump, right, and say here, historic conflict between Turks and Armenians settled by you, Donald Trump, and President Aliyev is dragging his feet a little bit, and so there's some tension there. And it's the interesting thing about this part of the world, if we can call the South Caucasus the Middle East as well, that the Turkish President Erdogan is angry with his brother Aliyev because Aliyev isn't being nice enough to the Armenians. That's
That's a novelty.
Yeah, we'll go deeper into that someday. We will, because it's fascinating and it's also important. This is Baron Wolf #1, and he says, I was about to post a nasty comment as requested, but then I spilled water on my computer. There was there was a widespread belief in the comments last week, Gadi, that our story about you spilling water on the computer was a lot of nonsense. Someone else wrote here that it's like saying your dog ate your homework. I can attest though.
I actually have the footage of me lifting the computer and then the camera switching to my awful laptop camera. And
yeah, you
and
got
everything.
very as the water seeped into the computer, you got very blurry. I watched it here, and the only reason we didn't publish it was that by the time you got it fixed, the war had already started. So that didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's it was Marquez 286. She says, finally, but water on the computer is an excuse equivalent to the dog ate my homework. And now we'll end on a nice one, Gadi. This is Rachel Sklar 12. She said, my mother watched this one, her first, and she says you guys are so funny. She'd watch even if she wasn't interested in the Middle East.
You understand, Mike, what happened with our show? It became amusement for some people.
Yeah, we amuse them.
Yeah. Which is nice. Good. Which is nice.
That's good.
Yeah,
I wonder if we were amusing this time. I didn't feel amusing, but you were amusing.
No, there was a very I mean my dumbest take was a serious downer, but I thought it was necessary. That was terrible. It's I was shocked by this, and I even shocking.
Made it was truly shocking. I mean, it really sometimes people there are taboos that are unspoken. I guess we do say don't speak ill of the dead, and so don't air your dirty laundry in public about when you see someone publicly talking about their children and criticizing them, and you just kind of go, ooh, no. Even if you understand that the children are doing bad things, or you think, don't do that, don't talk like that. You just don't talk like this. You just don't do it.
Yeah, but our discourse has gone that far. Anyway, let's not go. Let's not go back there. I think we're done for today, unless we have any.
Nope. We wait for Prime Minister Netanyahu to come on.
So we had a show this week as promised, and we promised to have a show next week too.
Yeah, we'll have a show next week. What do we know? What day we're going to do it?
I think it's going to be Wednesday or Thursday.
Okay, there we go. We'll see you then.
So thank you.
Like us, leave a comment, even a nasty comment.
You should remember to say this at the beginning of one show, Mike.
And subscribe. No, you don't want to say it right at the beginning. You want to because it's boring.
But then you have the largest number of viewers. Take that into consideration. Anyway, thank you very much for being with us.
Wouldn't you feel if you were just turned on a video and then like 3 minutes into it or 1 minute into it, they say like us, subscribe? You think it's pretty presumptuous. Let me see if you actually amused me. If you amused me, then I might.
That's I don't think it's the American frame of mind, Mike. I thought you should be in favor of it because Americans are unabashed about business and self-promotion. Israelis have a socialist background. So when I was growing up, you know how they called discussing your salary?
No.
The goal nefesh. עכשיו בוא נלך לגועל nefesh. You translate this.
Let's go to the disgusting thing.
The disgusting stuff. Let's talk about the disgusting stuff. Money. All right. Thanks for being with us. We'll be with you again next week on another episode of this amazing show, Tablets Israel Update, courtesy of the August Hudson Institute in Washington, D.C.
And Tablet Magazine.
I said Tablets Israel Update, didn't I?
I don't know. When you talk, I don't listen. Sorry.
One of the problems of this show.